Welcome everybody to today's session at the CPA Austin Mentor Program. Today's session is about sitting for the CPA exam. We have a few panelists here today to talk about their various experiences going through testing, as well as on the educational side, being a teacher, helping other students go through the program and eventually get licensure. I wanted to introduce our panelists today. We have Denise White, Erica Anderson, Kristen Dempster, and Larry Stevens. Professor White, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, can you say again?
Can you please introduce yourself? What's your name? Where do you work?
Yes, my name is Denise White. I am a professor at Austin Community College. Currently, in the last several years, I've been teaching our upper level courses that allow students who already have a bachelor's degree to become eligible to take the CPA exam. And currently I'm teaching advanced and accounting research. And I'm an assistant dean for business studies, just, on the side.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Professor White. Kristen, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Kristen Dempster. I am a staff auditor with Ashley & Associates, a former student of Dr. Stevens, and I believe I've also met Professor White. So I have a background in accounting. I've worked in accounting for a number of years. I also have a background in legal studies as well, but more recently I have found myself in a position where I'm working in the accounting field just because it seems more like it's steady work and it's a lot of fun.
I'm glad to have you here. Professor Stevens.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Larry Stevens, and I'm a colleague of Dr. White, Professor White, sorry, Denise. I am also a full-time professor of accounting at Austin Community College. And I am also hold the role of assistant dean in business studies for our distance education and external partnerships. Right now in our professional accounting program, I teach financial statement analysis and accounting ethics.
Thank you. And our last panelist, Erica Anderson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Anderson. I am currently a staff auditor at Ashley & Associates as well. I'm going on my second year in public accounting. But prior to this, I did a lot of roles in AP and AR, and I received my bachelor's from the Texas A&M San Antonio in accounting. So that's been the majority of my career.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. We are going to go through a couple questions that we've prepared about the CPA exam. And mentors, mentees, if you have any questions throughout this panel session, feel free to come off of mute and ask your question on the microphone, or you can send it via the chat, and I will go ahead and expose it to the panel. We'll go ahead and get started. So, warm-up question. What inspired you to go the CPA route? Dr. Stevens.
Well, I think I would have to say it was probably the instructors that I had, the professors that I had when I was an undergraduate student in accounting. At that time, which was many years ago, there typically was only one path to becoming licensed as a CPA. We didn't have all the alternatives that are available today. You basically had to get a degree in accounting to get your accounting hours so that you could sit for the CPA exam. And the instructors at my university in our junior and senior year were very insistent that we should take that exam just as soon as we finished school, because we were never going to get any smarter. So
that's very good advice. Take the exam right away. All right. Erica, how about you? What inspired you to go to the CPA route, coming from an APAR background?
Yeah, I actually never had intended on becoming a CPA. I had a professor while I was studying for my bachelor's who really encouraged us to go the CPA route. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. That sounds like too much. And then I made a life change moving into another city, and I just felt like I was very complacent. It's really hard to kind of get out of the AR and AP role. And I wanted something to do. I wanted something besides data entry. I wanted something more challenging. So after talking with a friend, and then she looked up everything and she's like, you can just go to ACC and get everything you need. And that way you have the hours to sit. I was like, okay, I think I might go this route. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Well, I hadn't heard that story before. I've known Erica for quite a few years now, and that's the first time I've heard it. So I'm so glad you're here. Kristen, how about you?
Well, for me, as I mentioned, I spent a number of years in the accounting field in different roles. And for me, I'm always like, I consider myself a life learner. So I'm always pushing myself forward with taking additional classes. And the CPA for me was a choice that, or at least was a way that would demonstrate, competency within my field. It also increases my marketability as a worker. It also allows me to do a lot more things, like, for example, represent clients at the IRS level. And so it just really opened a lot of doors, and I felt it was really a worthwhile investment in my time and resource.
Thank you. And then Professor White.
Similar to some of my students, I was a career changer. I did not grow up and want to be an accountant. I had a different career before I switched, and I quickly decided that accounting was the way to go, because it was the language of business, and that if I could learn it, then I would be flexible to go to many different areas. Second, getting the CPA exam and being an accountant is a skill, and that's adaptable to many different types of organizations besides public accounting, but corporations and consulting and law enforcement even, and of course, teaching. And for when I was getting involved, there were not a lot of women in the field of finance, or certainly upper levels of management. And so this certificate became like a calling card. It got your foot in the door, even though I was a female. And what this CPA told the employer that I was interested in was that here was a person who could set a goal, could persevere till that goal was achieved, and work really hard to get to that goal. And the knowledge is a given. Employers are also looking for the type of employee who can be a self-starter, look at new problems, figure them out, and move forward. And so those are my three reasons really for moving into the accounting world and getting that CPA.
Inspiring story too. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Let's go ahead and let's get into how you prepared for study. So I have two current CPA exam takers. Both Kristen and Erica are currently in the process of sitting for the exams, have taken tests already. And then Professor White and Professor Stevens are both licensed CPAs. So let's start with our test takers. What's your study schedule, and how did you decide what time of day to study, and kind of like the method of studying? How is it fitting into your life? Let's start with Kristen.
Yeah, so for me, one of the things I first did was looked at the different prep modules that are available. I'm sure everyone's heard about Becker and Rogers and some of the other offerings. For me, I chose the Becker route, and just looking at the curriculum and what the layout looks like, I'm the student who needs a larger block of time. And so for me, that works out to be evenings and weekends, because I want to be able to sit and watch the videos and then complete the work that's associated with the video so that I can reinforce the material. So I need a block of about 2 hours in the evening, and then on the weekends I can be essentially a weekend warrior, 68 hours a day. But those are the things I kind of considered when making a decision. And again, I'm a night owl, so for me that works out well, just working in the evenings.
Mm-hmm. And then Erica, what's kind of your study schedule? What's working for you?
So for me, in the very beginning, especially when I was taking FAR, I was talking to a lot of people and getting their feedback. And some people were telling me, on the weekdays, 4 hours, and then on weekends you can do like way more. And so I've kind of dialed back because also for my health, it's just not realistic when I'm a full-time employee in addition to going home and studying. And that doesn't even include, days that I have to commute. It's just like not realistic and I'm not getting enough sleep. So I do try, I've decreased it weekdays to about 2 hours a day to get that good studying in, watching videos. I do push really hard as well on the weekends for 4 to 6 hours, depending on what's going on. And that's been much, I think it's a better balance for me, and it helps me with focusing and making sure that I'm not just speeding through this information, I'm also retaining what I'm learning and not just moving on chunk by chunk. And one of the great things about a lot of the different study programs is they do allow you to set schedules and kind of regulate on how much you do want to set your goal, and then also to when you actually plan on sitting for your tests, which is a really great benefit and I recommend to utilize.
Just to kind of go off of what Erica said, based off my experience of the different review courses that you can purchase, you have the ability to kind of backwards design your schedule. You can say, this is this date I'm going to sit for the exam, or you can make one up to be a goal and reschedule it later. But it will go back to the current date and let you know how much of the review materials that are available to you, you should be completing each day in order to have covered enough material to be able to sit for the exam confidently. So that is a feature that's available in the review courses. Something that I ask Professor White and Professor Stevens, I know it's been a while since you studied for the exam. How do you think studying for the exam has changed from when you did it to now with the advent of the continuous open studying window or open testing windows? Professor White.
How has it, there's just so much more material that you have to learn than I did in 1980, let's say. It was still paper and pencil then and no calculator. On the plus side, it's you can have the opportunity to take the exam in throughout the year. And that was not the case when I was taking it. It was twice a year, 2.5 days, you did it or you did not. And that really ups the stress level. So I think allowing students, it's a much better arrangement, allowing students to kind of pace themselves, and you won't feel the same, how can I do this, especially when you're already working full time. Night before the first time I took the test, the first day of the test, I had worked till 11 o'clock at night at a client's, and then I had to be up to take the train into New York to sit in the National Guard Armory to take that test. But so I think the quantity is an issue, and that would lead me to suggest that you cannot memorize your way to success on the CPA exam. You absolutely have to be well grounded in the basics and find the patterns that exist in accounting. So you have this kind of framework and you can plug in the major stuff and then learn the details. But if you're trying to memorize or just study in a silo, foreign currency and investments and receivable, it's not going to work. You have to really be thinking all the time in debits and credits. That is the language, and there's a pattern there to how we use them.
Okay. Professor Stevens, did you have anything to add about kind of how the CPA exam has changed over time?
Yeah, I was going to take just a minute and just kind of share how I prepared for the CPA exam back in the mid to late 80s. Basically, we did not have, obviously the internet was up there. We did not have computer resources to rely upon to help us. The basic resources that we used were, if you had access to a library, like if you were still going to school and taking classes, you could go to the library and there was a section in the accounting section where they had copies of old exams with the questions and the problems. And you could go in and you could pull those off the shelf and you could sit down and go through and use those as study tools to kind of gauge where you were in terms of your understanding of the material. And so that was one method that we used to study. And then, of course, as we always tell students, CPA review courses. They offered them back then. Typically, most students that took them were working during the day. Weren't really students. We were entry-level accounting employees. And you'd go to work from 8 to 5, and then you'd go take a lunch or a dinner break. And then probably 6 or 6:30 up until about 10 or 10:30, you would go sit in an office in a room somewhere with probably 30 other people, and you'd watch a couple hours of videos. You'd probably get some lecture, you'd answer some questions, you'd do some exercises, and then you'd go home at 10 or 10:30, and then you'd get up and you'd do it again the next day. I would say they recommended on average back then 200 hours of review and prep time for each section of the exam. Back then, the exam was 5 sections, not 4, as Professor White mentioned. And when you initially got started taking the CPA exam, the rules were such that you couldn't pick and choose which section you wanted to take. You had to sit for all of it, 2.5 days. And so pretty much it was just commonplace amongst anybody in the accounting profession. The first week in May, the first week in November, you just took that time off. You just planned for it because you knew you were going to go take the exam. And so you were basically trying to take yourself out of the office, but then you were replacing that with a different type of stress, in that the exams were roughly 3.5 hours long. So you had a morning exam and an afternoon exam on Thursday and Friday, and you had an afternoon exam on Wednesday. Yeah, and it was very stressful. It was hard. It was really hard. And then you had to keep taking all 4 sections. So one of the things that would happen during a typical exam that Professor White was talking about, you go to these large convention centers in large cities to take, because they had lots of rooms and tables and everybody went in there. You were required to stay 1 hour in each exam. You could not leave during the first hour. But then after that hour, you could get up and leave. And so you could tell when the hour passed, because you would hear people start shuffling around in their chairs, getting up and leaving. And they were like, yeah, I know I'm not going to pass this section exam. I signed up for it. I did what I had to do, and I'm out of here. And it was unfortunate because every time you took the exam, you had to pay for it. So, but you get that. But then after that, things would settle back down, and the next couple of hours were quiet, and you could focus on what you were doing. But yeah, it was all pencil and paper and no calculators, and all the math that you had to do on pencil and paper and in your head. It was very different back then. So there's some trade-offs. We didn't have the technology, but we had less information. So you know,
I was fortunate in that the firm I was joining scheduled a week for us to take a review course. So it was 8 hours, 5 days, that was it. And then you had the materials. And I literally studied. In fact, I stopped driving. I would go, my husband at that time was upstate, and I would take the bus. So it was a 3-hour drive. That's when I did my studying all the time to get ready for it. But as I said, it doesn't make sense to do it that way anymore. I think this is a much better setup. And the other thing, to reduce the stress level, you know, a lot of us are high achievers, right? Or perfectionists, you pick the word. I studied as if I wanted to get an A, but you don't need one for this test. You're a CPA when you get 75% or 75, whatever they call it. It's good to go, and no one's going to ask you, did you get an 85 or 75? So study like you have to as much as you can, but you can lower the stress level for yourself just before the test by reminding yourself you don't need to know it all and you don't have to be perfect.
Yes, that's very, very good advice, that you're still a CPA if you got a 75. It's not published anywhere. No one
Yep.
can go and find your scores and say, oh, this person just skated by.
Mhm.
You're a CPA regardless. So for Erica and Kristen, have a different setup of exams right now. What order are you taking your exams and why did you pick that order? Let's start with Erica.
I am currently on audit. I started with FAR, which I finally passed. And I started with FAR though, because everyone said it was like the biggest monster. And I totally, absolutely agree. FAR does cover just a wide range. I feel like everything I learned during my time obtaining my bachelor's was pretty much in that tests. And so I feel like it was one to knock out, and it was one I felt comfortable with my clock starting with that one as well. So I did it in that order. And then from there I did audit currently on. And then from there I'm going to do BEC and then reg after that. And I've heard from other people that once you pass FAR, it's good to do audit and BEC afterwards, because you'll see a lot of things that you did in FAR in those two as well. Whereas with reg, you won't see any of that stuff. So that's kind of my mindset behind that order.
Now, are you taking BEC as well, just to try and make it before 2024?
I haven't started yet now. I plan on very soon, hopefully.
Okay. And then Kristen, what's your order?
So just like Erica, I decided FAR was probably the best starting point. And as Erica mentioned, not only is it a beast, it's really one that you want to focus on because it's really the core competency of an accountant. You got to know your debits and your credits and, all of the rules associated with, accounting properly. And then for me, after FAR, it's really dependent on when I actually pass FAR, because that's the one I'm working on right now. And the timing, as you mentioned, Julie and Erica, it really comes down to what time of year. Like BEC, I might go ahead and jump straight into BEC next just for the timing purpose. And also I'm paying attention to reg because I don't want to take reg right before or right after the new year, I guess I should say. It's just, so for me, it's FAR, then I'm going to go for audit. And then it's either BEC or reg, depending on what time of year, but I'm flexible.
Well,
Can you expand on the why reg, not at the beginning of the year?
I think for me, reg, if we take reg at the very beginning of the year, there's oftentimes there's new tax rules and things I'm concerned I might not have enough exposure to. So I usually wait for my prep materials to catch up to the testing. That's for me personally, I would feel more comfortable with that. But again, this is a choice that everybody gets to make. We all take them. It doesn't really matter which order we take them in. It's just what you feel comfortable with. And because tax is probably not my strongest suit, it's one I know I'm going to have to work on a little bit harder. I want to make sure that I have all of the material, the testing material in front of me, and I've had a chance to at least work through it so that I feel comfortable moving into that test.
Okay, Professor White?
Maybe you don't know, but the exam changes effective January 2024. And what we're recommending to our students, and it's changing in that there will be a core, and there's 3 sections in that core. Audit, what they're calling bar, not FARs, and tax, okay? And then the 4th test, you choose a discipline, one of 3 possible disciplines, which will be a higher level test on that discipline. what we're recommending to our students, if you get BEC out of the way before January 2024, then you don't have to take a discipline. Okay, you won't have to take, you will have the equivalent of FARS, but they won't cover things like foreign currency and pensions and stock options. Those will be covered in that discipline, that special discipline for bar. So it will be the equivalent of FAR today will be somewhat easier than it has been in the past. So the recommendation is get BEC done first. And Larry, what was the second one? May have been audit. No, let me think about this.
I was thinking it was audit.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it is
that's
audit.
what I've been hearing as well.
Yeah,
is audit.
because it's similar. There's not going to be much of a change. One of the disciplines is not audit. It's bar again, it's tax, and it's the data analytics one. So yeah, if you can sit before the end, and they're going to cut off when you can apply to sit for the exam. So be aware, I think it's late, just before Thanksgiving in November, but you can double check the AICPA website to get BEC out. And then if you can audit the next year, you're right, tax and the equivalent of FAR. So it's really important to know about the change.
Mm-hmm. And just to go a little bit off of what Kristen was saying about her review materials catching up, the CPA exam, at least in my understanding, it goes through updates twice a year, one in January and one in July. And it's not always the case that a test gets updated, but it is fairly common for reg to get updated because there are new tax regulations that happen that get rolled into the exam. So what she was mentioning was that your testing materials that you're studying with will get updated, and you can say when you're setting up your study plan, I want to study with the materials that will be in effect for this testing period. So you can be aware of any of those new rules that you might be tested over. Okay, all right. So we prepared for the test, we picked our order, we took the test, or we're gonna go take the test. What was your experience like at the testing center? You know, things have been really weird with the pandemic testing as well. So Erica, what was your testing center experience like?
Well, it's always a little nerve-wracking, I feel like. And let me just say, for anyone who has never tested, I don't think you'll ever walk out great, like 100%. Like, I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone and they've been like, I crushed it. If they do, like, good for them. But it's very rare. Going to the testing center, just be prepared to be sitting there for 4 hours. I always go in with tennis shoes and sweatpants, and I wear a sweater because it's cold in those rooms. Especially if you're testing at the Austin location, they do tend to kind of run a little behind. So don't feel too frantic if you're not starting exactly at your time, because it's taking them time to bring people in. They're short staffed, it seems like. So it takes them a while to make sure everyone's set up correctly as well. So I would just recommend be comfortable. They recently did make it apparently so that you can have water with you. I choose not to take that because I don't want to have to feel like you only get one pause in your tests. And I think it's only after section 3 that you're able to pause the test and actually like get up and walk around and go to the bathroom and stuff like that. So I'm not taking advantage of that new rule, but I highly recommend just go there comfortable as can be and just try and calm yourself down as best as possible.
Can you go a little bit into, you said test 3, what are all the different tests?
There are 5 testlets. The first 2 testlets are going to be your multiple choice. And it ranges, I feel like when I was taking FAR, it was like 33 per section. With audit, it's 36 per section. And then your last 3 test lists will usually be your simulations, which your first simulation will usually be about 2 sims, and then your last 2 are 3 different sims. And you usually will have at least 1 research question, at least for FAR and for audit as well. And then you'll usually have something where you're selecting or you're entering in numbers or a calculation of some sort.
Professor White, did you have something to say?
Yeah, they're changing the simulations concerning research. As I understand it, currently they give you the topic, and what you have to plug in is the citation from the codification. They're not going to do that in the future. They're going to interweave the research into a full-bodied kind of exercise. And you'll have to use the information to help answer the simulation. So research, I think, and certainly writing is being downplayed a bit.
Mm-hmm. With the new CPA model, since BEC is going away, there is no writing section in the new CPA model, which is either really exciting or really disappointing if writing is your strong suit. Okay, Kristen, how about you?
I would say, just as Erica was mentioning, the dress well, dress comfortably for the test center. It is very cold at the Austin location. I want to say probably about between 60 and 65 degrees. And so for someone who's kind of, warm-blooded, that doesn't work out so well. I don't enjoy that. But the other thing I would pay attention to is from your proctoring site, your Prometric, you're going to get a list of things, do's and don'ts. Really pay attention to that closely because they're serious about security there. And so you want to make sure you don't wear any jewelry, you bring your NTS, bring 2 forms of identification, come prepared. You thought the airport was bad. Wait, getting through security. Prometrics, like I said, they're serious. And so, gosh, other than that, I would just say, use the headphones they'll provide to you, like noise canceling headphones, so that you won't be disturbed while taking the test. And you're allowed to have a snack, like Erica was mentioning. You can leave after the 3rd testlet for a short period of time. They do have lockers for you where you lock all of your belongings. You can go out there quickly, you grab a snack, use the restroom, and then you have to go right back in because you don't want to miss your next window for testing. But other than that, just try to relax, get there early. As Erica mentioned, sometimes they get a little bit behind checking in test takers. So make sure you know where you're going and just do the best. You've studied so hard and you're not going to be able to cram the next few hours right before tests. So just go do your best and keep your fingers crossed. And if you don't get the score you like, then you can try it again.
Yes, thank you. Professor Stevens, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I wanted to let everybody know that probably, I guess it was last month in March, we did this towards the end of the month. The Texas Society of CPAs is working with Surgent CPE, and they are offering what are called mock CPA exams. And they've been doing it on Friday afternoons. I'm trying to get them to offer some alternative times, like maybe do an evening, maybe do a weekend. But it's very similar. So if you are a person that has a tendency to have a lot of test anxiety, I would highly encourage you to watch your email and come to one of the mock CPA exams, because what we're doing in the Austin chapter is we're using the training facility, and you bring in your laptop and you register for the exam, and then you've got a 4-hour window. It's not exactly like Prometric, but it's just kind of a little bit more of an informal setting where you can come and get used to what it's like to sit there for 4 hours, because the mock CPA exam will last 4 hours. And then right after that, you get a score report showing how well you did or how poorly you did, which is kind of nice because then it lets you know where you stand, and then you can adapt or modify your study plan based on those results. And so yeah, I would highly encourage somebody, especially if you're not used to taking exams on a computer, come do the mock CPA exam. The next one that we have scheduled is for June the 8th, which I think is a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to do it again at the Austin chapter offices. You'll be getting information coming out that probably about next month sometime. So just wanted to throw that out there in case people have test anxiety. You can come get a flavor for what it's like, what to expect.
Wonderful. That is a great option. You mentioned that there's these score reports. I know that when you take the actual CPA exam, you do get a score report. It's very general. It goes over the different key topics and just says if you scored better or worse than someone scoring around 80, I believe. Is the Surgent one more detailed about what kind of things that you can work on towards getting a better score?
I'm not really sure because I did not ask students to give me copies of their reports because I didn't want them to feel like they had to report back to me and share with me, because if I'm just anticipating, don't prepare, just go take it for the experience and just see how you do, having not prepared. And then that kind of gives you some idea of where you need to go headed forward. So, but I think it's a fairly comprehensive report that students get. I know I see there are a couple of my students that are here today in the session, and I think maybe they might have taken it. So if they want to turn their mic on or make some notes in the chat about the feedback that they got back from Surgent, I'm sure the rest of the group would be willing or want to hear that.
Okay, well, we'll give you a chance to do that as you're typing.
Hi.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi. I took it and I took it at home. Actually, I didn't go to the testing center because I couldn't do it on a Friday. I had to do it over the weekend. But I took reg and I got a 55, which I was kind of proud of. But yeah, I didn't think it gave too much detail. And my question for the two girls taking the exam right now, what's y'all's timeline? Like, are y'all trying to finish it within the year? When did you start? Like, I think you both said you took one exam already. What's y'all's I heard you how long you're studying and stuff, but I would like to have more information. Thanks.
So, Kristen, how about you go first?
Sure. Well, I'm with FAR right now, and as Professor Stephen mentioned, it's about a 200-hour study period. So for me, because I'm working full-time as an auditor right now with Ashley, and I also have a family, and we've got some family needs that are happening in the background. For me, I'm pushing it out. Like Julie had mentioned, you can actually determine, you can work with the prep materials, and they will say, if you want to finish it in 4 months, this is what you need to study, and it'll tell you, it'll line it up for you every single day. If you want to be more aggressive, I know you can do it much more quickly. For me, I want to give myself enough time. So I personally decided a 4-month block seems pretty reasonable to try to work that in. Because again, I've only got weekends and evenings, and evenings it's kind of spotty because oftentimes I'm at client sites, or I've got other family matters that need to be tended to. There are other people, like I know Julie had mentioned in past to me, at least, that she finished all of the sections within a very short period of time, within about 4 to 6 months, if I'm not mistaken. So it really depends on the time you have available and how aggressive you want to be, but you could take it as long as you wanted.
So to kind of go with what Kristen said, when I was taking the exams, I was a very aggressive schedule. I finished them from start to finish with 6 months, passing all the first time around. But I was very fortunate. I was working in public accounting, but I was at a niche firm. I only worked on agreed upon procedures engagements. We didn't do full-blown audits. So I had a lot of downtime in my day. So I was actually able to study during the workday, which was allowed. And if I was in a traditional public accounting firm, it would have taken me a lot longer. So I was taking advantage of the position that I had at the time. I did want to note, Erica brought this to my attention the other day, that NASBA, the National Association for State Boards of Accountancy, just recently extended their recommendation for the time period to take all of your tests. It's currently set at 18 months. It's a rolling 18-month window from when you've passed the exam. If you pass FAR and you don't finish the other three in the 18-month window, they start expiring, like the 18 months rolls. They have changed their recommendation to be now 30 months, which is significantly longer. However, the individual state boards need to approve that change in their own legislation in order for that to take effect. Larry or Denise, have you heard, do you know what the climate is about that? Do you think TSBPA is going to be extending the window?
I haven't heard. I mean, it's been debated. I think they may want to. The last meeting, Larry, didn't we go together to the meeting where they were discussing the changes they were proposing to the legislature? And I think they were proposing a change, but it wasn't 30 months. It was less than that.
I thought they had originally kind of settled on 24 months,
Yes, I think
an
so.
additional 6-month extension. The 30-month has just come out recently, and it's going to depend on what all the other states are going to do, because Texas, I'm sure, is going to be try to be consistent with most of the other states.
Mm-hmm. So there is hope for a longer window in the future. As of right now, you need to be able to pass all 4 sections within a consecutive 18-month period.
Awesome. Thanks.
Oh,
And
awesome.
also, I did read that they are, there's a bill in the House, I think, that's going to try to get, if you've had like 120 hours versus the 150. I don't know if that's passed yet or not. Have anyone heard about that?
Yes, I've been paying a little bit of attention to it. The weekly CPA Austin updates that we get, the newsletter, had an update on the current status. It's passed the House, I think, and it's just about done passing the Senate. And when that's done, it's going to go to the governor. And what it's doing is it's not removing the 150-hour rule. It is just changing the requirement in order for you to be able to start sitting for the exams. When I took the exams, I had to have had my 150 hours completed before I was eligible to sit. However, now you can start testing once you've reached 120 hours, whenever this bill passes, which is highly likely at this point. So I believe it's going to be a really good thing, because I think I might have done better on my exams if I was able to take reg right after I finished my tax courses. Professor Stevens.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you are correct, Julie, in terms of the progression of the legislation. I believe the effective date is going to be September 1st. So anticipate that there's going to be a huge or a surge of requests to sit for the exam in the last part of this year. Because of that reason, legislative changes and because of exam changes. So the Texas State Board is probably going to have a surge there in the fall. So if you're planning on doing that, be patient with them, because they have limited staff as well. And it's going to take a little bit longer. Just like if you send them something right now that's going to get to them next month in May, it's going to take them longer because they get deluged with material in May when everybody's graduating. And it just takes them a little longer to process the paperwork, but you'll get it done. The other thing, there was something else I was going to say about legislation. When the legislation passes, it will allow you to start as soon as 120 hours, but you have to have completed at least 21 hours of advanced accounting courses in that 120 hours to be able to sit. So again, that application of intent process that I tell my students about, that's where they'll go through and they'll analyze to make sure that you've met the requirements, but you will still need 150 hours for the actual CPA license itself.
Mm-hmm.
I also, I forget where I heard this, but if you're really want to take the tests before the end of the year, one part of the test, you need to get your reservation, I don't know what they call it,
Notice schedule.
because there's not going to be, if there is this huge surge, there's not going to be enough room to accommodate everyone. The other thing I would say, it's a little dangerous, I think, extending the number of months to 24 or 30. Things get old and life makes you busy. It would be my recommendation to get it out of the way as quickly as you can. I've had some older students who sat for 2 or 3 sections, never got around to finishing. Now they're having to redo coursework in order to sit for the exam, and they need it, the CPA now, for their jobs. So I would think faster the better.
I agree. The faster you can get it done, because life does sneak up on you. However, I do appreciate that you now have a longer period before tests roll off, but still keep in mind to try to get it done as quickly as possible.
I have a question, Julie, on that.
Yes.
Hey, this is Sam. Hi, Professor White. Question. So then I'll be done with all my class stuff and eligible, I guess, to sit for the CPA exam starting next year. If I had the option of either, getting the work experience and taking parts of the test as I'm getting that 1 year's work experience to get that license, if you had that option, or just focus on, getting the test done and then go work, which would you do, or which would you recommend?
Personally, I'm gonna answer this one first. Personally, if you have the means to not work for your study period time, I would say dedicate time to studying before you go out and work. Because once you've passed exams or started showing that you're passing exams, employers are going to hire you even if you have a gap. That is not a hard gap to explain in your employment history or on your resume. If you don't have the means to take 6 months off, or maybe you can do it faster when you're not working full time, then I would suggest do what works for you and your family. Erica, do you have any thoughts?
I would agree. As somebody who said they did not want to become a CPA right after they graduated and got their bachelor's, and then years later decided to go back to school and do everything. And now I'm not in a position where I can just take a break and not study at the same time. I would highly recommend to take advantage if you can.
And then Kristen, do you agree?
Absolutely. If you are fortunate enough to have a period of time where you can just focus on CPA studies without having any other distractions, it's a lot faster. And you're not going to get that chance later with serious relationships, mortgages, other indebtedness, whether it's be time or money. You're going to have to put those things first, unfortunately, and try to juggle a more complex work-life balance. So I agree. Get it done as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And I have met a few people when I've gone to career fairs that have done exactly that, where they just took time off to study for the exam versus going straight into the workforce after graduation. So it's not uncommon to see that happen as well.
Did you say it's 200 hours for the whole, like 2 hours of study time for a whole exam, or 200 per section?
Per section.
Oh, that's fun.
And I spent maybe 120 to 200 per section. It varied on the section. We have about 10 minutes left of our session today, and I want to reserve the rest of it for breakout rooms so we can chat, unless other mentees or mentors have questions for our panelists. Please come off mute and ask. I'll give you a few moments if you have a question.
I have another question, Julie, for those who, or for the two persons sitting for or taking the exam right now. As far as the material that you covered in your review course, and then the portions of the test you've taken so far, is it kind of similar to like how school was, where we're going through class, or you go through the lecture, you work out problems there, and the problems that you kind of work during class are sometimes fairly similar to the ones you get on the exam, or is it just like it's completely different?
Let's go with Kristen first.
As I mentioned, I use Becker, and they currently have a setup where everything is broken up into a lecture, and they have a kind of a written section as well, where they give like a part of a book that you can read through and look at the written materials. And then you go through and you reinforce within, problems. And so then after that section, you also then have little tests. And so you do that. Essentially, it's like school. You go through a chapter, you read it, you do the homework, and then you have a little quiz. And then those quizzes build to larger unit tests. And so, that it's pretty much very similar to school. It's just no one's there to force you to turn your work in on time. You have to stay diligent and stay on task by yourself.
Kristen,
Go
sorry, I had one more question.
for it.
Kristen, what Becker did you do? Did you do the most expensive one? And then Erica, I don't think she said what program she was using, or I missed it.
I signed up for the full premium program with Becker, so it had 4 of the sections. I opted for all of the materials available to me. I would encourage you as a student to use whatever coupon codes that you might get through your school or other sources. I did not pay full price. I paid about 50% off. So it's much more affordable that way. I also had purchased Rogers in past. I abandoned Rogers because I didn't really like the presentation, and I found that he was not always politically correct. He would say some off-color comments here and there, so that wasn't I wasn't a fan of that. But I would just encourage you to try. Each one of them has about a week or so free trial. Go ahead and try them all out. See how you like the interface. They all have apps with them, so you can learn on the go. See what works with your learning style and the amount of time that you have available to dedicate to studying. So hopefully that answered your question, Natalie.
Professor White, just kind of to follow up with Sam's question, when you're preparing homework questions or vetting the questions that are inside of Connect for your students, do you reference any release test questions to see if it's on par with what the test is doing?
I have. It's not been that useful to me. The thing I try and remind students about is we're working from a textbook, and even different authors of the same text, of same subject, different textbooks use different terminology. So don't get stuck on a word. You have to understand what the event is about and what you're being asked to do. So that's one reason I haven't used many of the CPA questions that we have access to, because students complain when it's not like the homework or not like the textbook. And, when you're learning, I get it, but that's not the way it is on the exam. I mean, they're not taking from one textbook. I think in general, the test questions are not as detailed in the weeds as what we have to do in academia. So that's the other difference.
I do want to kind of link that to real life. I'm an auditor and I work with lots of nonprofit clients, and some of those nonprofit clients will hire audit preparation support, which are other public accounting firms that offer that service. And I will be interacting with other CPAs, and we use different terms from each other. And I have to explain, no, this is what I mean when I say this word. I want this type of support. So even within our CPA locally, we all use different terminology. So just the general understanding and being able to explain what you mean is what's going to get you far. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. Do we want to do the breakout room since there's only 5 minutes left? Mentees, you want to vote?
We do have a good amount of mentors and mentees this time if we want to do it for just a few minutes.
Okay, I'll give you a few moments to catch up with your mentor-mentee pairing. Let's give a moment to our panelists to say thank you. Thank you, Kristen, Denise, Larry, and Erica so much for being here and sharing your experience with us about the CPA exam. There's a lot of exciting new things happening here in in Texas and with the NASPA. I really do appreciate all of your insight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.